everyone, I'm SJ and this video is all about podcasts. The podcast that I have binge listened to already in 2022, so it's March now. I've become podcast obsessed because I'm a mum of 3 and I travel a lot. I spend 3 days a week here and 2 days a week at my sister's, and I just am constantly on the move, and I love listening to stuff because it keeps my hands can be busy with the kids, cooking the dinner, in the car, taking them places, but I've always got a podcast on the go, and I've discovered some that I cannot stop talking about that I'm jealous I have already listened to, so I thought I would share my absolute favourites with you. I also have my own podcast which is called Baby Name Envy, which is a baby name consultancy, which might sound a bit niche, but it is an entertaining podcast, which I will link below as well. It does really well in the charts for parenting over here in the UK because it's a consultancy where pregnant people write in and ask us, like, I need a name, or my name's been stolen, or my mother-in-law hates the name, or I've got an awful surname, or I'm changing my name as an adult. Can you help? And we absolutely love doing it. Podcasts that I have loved though are sort of either, there are some true crime ones, but there's also just some amazing stories. So I absolutely loved the podcast Harsh Reality. What I love about Harsh Reality is it's presented by a trans woman, and it's all about this 90s show, which I vaguely remember, which was called There's Something About Miriam. And Miriam was a trans woman who was kind of like a bachelorette style. She was kind of the prize, and they flew out a load of guys to this villa in Ibiza where they competed to win to be her partner, and then they were going to go off. They got 10 grand I think and went off on like a yacht, but they didn't tell the men that Miriam was a trans woman. So it's a really fascinating and important story actually, presented by a trans presenter, all about what that show meant for the community as a whole, what that would look like in today's world, and who was the real victim. Was it Miriam, or was it these men who were on this game show? So it was told by a lot of the men who were in the show, and the winner of the show is on the podcast as well. It really looked into what happened afterwards. There was a humongous lawsuit afterwards where the men actually sued the TV company for, I think it was like for sexual abuse, because they felt that they had been sort of led and sort of humiliated on the TV show. And then Miriam's side of the story where, who was she? Where did she come from? How proud was she of the show? And then what it meant to like the trans community as a whole, who saw her as a real kind of icon for them, really putting trans women on in the mainstream media, but her life before that had been, she tried to be a pop star. She was really keen on celebrity and being famous, and what happened to her afterwards was really tragic as well. And it's kind of a dark twist at the end of the podcast, so you're left kind of wondering what really happened to Miriam. It's a really thoughtful podcast, and I think it raises a lot of issues that are really interesting for today around exploitation and around rights and all of that stuff. But I just found it really, really fascinating and really enjoyed it, and I think you would as well. It's really sensitively told. The next one I loved was a podcast called Chameleon Wild Boys. So I think Chameleon is the name of the show. They've done a few series, but the series that I'm listening to, just kind of caught up, it's called Wild Boys, and it's really great again because it's told and hosted by a guy who lived in a place called Vernon in Canada, and he lived through this experience, and it's always been something in his childhood that he wanted to go back, revisit and tell the story on the podcast, which is always really insightful to have the person who's been through the experience and has a personal connection to it. And it's called Wild Boys because it's the story of these 2 boys who appear in this sort of lovely town, peaceful town in Canada, and they're stick thin and they only eat fruit, and they kind of come out of the bush, is it called the bush in Canada? They come out of the woods and they're sort of buying food in the grocery store, but they just buy like avocados and fruit, and they go back and disappear into the woods again. And a woman in the town, a mother, she's like, what's going on with those boys? They're so thin and they don't look well, and she leaves her phone number for them in the store, and the whole town is talking about these boys. Have you seen them? They look really odd. And the boys come to her, she reaches out to them, and they tell her that they're actually They've been raised in the woods by their parents. They've been kind of thrown out by their parents now, who have gone off and they're sort of abandoned, and they're living in the woods. They have absolutely nothing. They've been raised without any electricity, any access to modern life. And so Tammy goes about and the whole town rallies around these two boys. I've always been really into like feral children and that sort of story. So it's really interesting. However, none of it's true. None of it's true, and it goes into how they discover the boys' real identities, and it's a really, again, fascinatingly told story. I love it because they're all short, kind of like 6 to 8 episodes. I think they're all available now, because when I was listening to it, it was like next week, and I was like, no, I cannot wait. And at the end, they have an interview with both of the boys now, and this was 20 years ago when this happened. So again, it's absolutely fascinating. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's really, really interesting. And again, a lot about family, a lot about community spirit and helping people who are less fortunate, and a lot about the system as well, how the system works with people who don't quite fit into that system. So when their story comes out, I was like, okay, but then when you meet them 20 years on and they start telling their side of it, is when it kind of gets a bit mind-blowing. So yeah, absolutely loved that. These jump all around the place. The other one I'm loving, actually, these are all on one app called like Wonderbly, I think, but that's just coincidence because I just love all their podcasts. Even the Rich, it's called. So it's an American series presented by two women. I don't know who they are, and their voices are very similar. So I'm always like, who's talking? But what I loved was the Jessica Simpson story. So it's called like Blonde Billionaire Boss or something, Blonde Bombshell Billionaire or something. So I didn't know that Jessica Simpson, the pop star, is now this billionaire businesswoman, really, really successful with a shoes line predominantly, I guess, all around when she did Daisy Duke, these boots are made for walking, and how she interpreted that and creates her own shoe range, and apparently it's made her billions. But it tells the story of, she was one of the very first reality stars, so they had a show. She was married to a guy called Nick Lachey or Lackey, and Lachey, and they were married, and her dad was a religious pastor, so she got into, it tells the story of her childhood and getting into fame, and how she was always kind of pipped to the post by like Britney and Christina, and they always sort of, when Britney came on the scene, she was also this kind of like, you know, Southern Belle, religious sort of core girl, and she ended up getting all the things that Jessica got, and Jessica always felt kind of third fiddle, but how that's kind of served her through her life and how she got to this fame. Her dad quickly saw the idea of this reality TV show, and how much of her sort of ditzy blonde was her being a really bright business mogul and understanding that was the role she needed to play for the show, and how much of it was kind of just who she was, and how she ended up sort of transcending, I guess, or growing up in the limelight and then becoming quite different. And then she became an alcoholic, which I had no idea about. She was an alcoholic while she was a mum. So she talks about how she doesn't talk, it's the presenters telling her story about how she used to go to her daughter's like school like events with like this cup full of alcohol. It looked quite bad. Her intervention with her friends, and how she's gone on to reinvent herself, and she spectacularly quit music after appearing drunk at a Dolly Parton tribute, and totally screwing up, fell apart basically on stage, and Dolly Parton actually intervenes and kind of brings her back a little bit, gives her sort of second chance of music. So it's a really interesting story. I'm not a big Jessica Simpson fan, but I really enjoyed hearing her life, and I guess it's kind of like, you know, parallels with like, I guess I sort of have seen a lot of that throughout my life. If I remember when she was a pop star, I remember when she did the movie and stuff like that. Parenting wise, I'm obsessed with Parenting Hell. I think it is one of the top podcasts now in the UK, with Josh Widdicombe and Rob Beckett. I absolutely love it. They do 2 episodes a week, one on a Tuesday, which is just them chatting about parenting from a dad's perspective. But I think most people who listen are mums. There's lots of dads as well. They just crack me up. It's just their real life, but they've just got such a genuine humour in it, and they're kind of not afraid to sort of say things that might be a little bit more cutting, I guess, about life as well. You know, they sort of say stuff which I find quite fun, and it just has become such a part of my routine in the week to listen to it, which is bad. Then on a Friday they do interview, which are hit and miss, but I loved the Charlotte Church one a lot. And then they interview a lot of comedians like Michael McIntyre. The Paris Fury one is amazing, about her 6 kids and her life, because she's a famous gypsy family married to Tyson Fury, so that's a really interesting one as well. But I absolutely love it. It makes me laugh out loud. Sweet Bobby, have you listened to it yet? This is kind of more the true crime side of it. It's absolutely lush. You will absolutely love it. It is about a woman who gets kind of catfished, but it's a 10-year deception. It goes on for 10 years. It's been quite a lot in the media here. She's done a lot of TV shows, so you might be familiar with the story. Basically, she falls in love with a guy online who she knows in real life, but they start talking more online after his marriage breaks up, and he's living in America and she's living here, and he's very unwell in hospital, and they start talking and they fall in love and begin a relationship that's very all-encompassing and almost becomes kind of quite controlling of her, even though she's living here in the UK. And it goes on for so many years, and it's all a lie. It's actually somebody very, very close to her in the UK, shall we say. But Bobby really exists, and Bobby is also in the podcast as well, which is really lovely to hear his side of it. And it talks about the law a lot around catfishing and how it's not actually illegal, and how this woman's life is pretty much destroyed. She spends 10 years of her life in a relationship that isn't true, and the actual only person with a lawsuit is actually the real Bobby, who can say that he was impersonated, but there's never been a criminal conviction. So it's a really topical thing, you know, how far can people go online before they've crossed a criminal case? And then at the moment I'm listening to Twin Flames. It is unreal. It is again like a scandal drama about YouTube, so I love it. And it is about this couple who starts this YouTube channel around the concept of twin flames, which is kind of a religious concept that you have one twin flame and it's even stronger than a soulmate. And if you reach your twin flame, you live in this harmonious relationship, I can't remember what it's called, where you live this higher life, basically an exalted life. And they turn their YouTube channel into what can only be described as a controlling cult. So they start selling the courses, and people have to sign up and pay a lot of money to be coached into finding their twin flame, or they think they've got their twin flame, they get coached into how to get their twin flame. And it is unreal what happens and the people who are in the story. This is still being released. I'm just listening to it now. So they get told, you know, get on the verge of stalking, follow them around, claim your twin flame, and they basically push them into almost illegal activities where the twin flames aren't interested. They're not in relationships with these people. It's like fueling a obsession with another person, to the point, as I said, that they're stalking them, that they're destroying their own lives in this belief, and in this fueled belief by this couple that they deserve to be with that person. When it doesn't work out, one of the women whose story we're listening to with her twin flame, this guy from work who, not interested, gets married to somebody else, the leaders turn around and say, actually it's because you're masculine, so you're actually a male. And now in the story, she's in the process of turning herself, literally changing her gender, not through her own choice, but because she's told that she's actually masculine, and that her real twin flame is another woman who coincidentally is also in the group. So that makes it very convenient for the leaders to put those two together as twin flames, and the lengths that people will go to. Really following these leaders, these spiritual leaders. Twin flames is a real thing. I googled it and there's loads of YouTube videos about it. Not a real thing as in it's real, but as in it's out there as a concept, a deep belief that people hold. So it's really interesting, and you can read about, you can Google twin flames and find all about it. But those are my binge-worthy podcasts. You can tell I'm so excited and obsessed with them. I would love to hear yours in the comment section below. Let me know which podcast you're absolutely loving at the moment. If you want more recommendations, let me know, and I'll do a part 2 in a few months when I've listened to a few more, because I probably listen to a podcast every 2 days. I honestly binge them. I don't know when I have the time. I think just walking around doing the school run and stuff. And I will see you on my next video. Bye guys.